welcome to the last session of this spring of Counselor U, brought to you by Eastern New Mexico University's Counseling Department, and sponsored by the New Mexico Expanding Opportunities Project. We're so grateful that we were able to receive the help to get this project in motion and able to have all the fun that we've had so far in these podcasts. I'm here, I'm Nikki McDowell Horn, and I've got my fellow co-hosts Taylor Call and Katrina Weir. And today we have a special guest, Dr. Janet Birkey. She is so wonderful to all of us, and she's helped me as I'm finishing up and graduating, helped me to get all these things together in this project with Counselor U. So we owe a lot to her, and we're thankful to have her. Okay, so I'm going to hand this over to Taylor. Taylor, if you will, you are our host for tonight.
Thank you. So we're just going to ask some questions with Dr. Birkey and kind of do a Q&A here. We'll focus on questions about, like, once you receive your degree, what's next? And then we're going to ask some personal questions, if you don't mind, Dr. Birkey.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, very, very well. So the first question is, what are some typical duties and responsibilities of counselors?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. And I did make my notes here because I wanted to be prepared and not let something slip through the cracks that I wish I had said later. But I thought about that. And, we go through school and we learn the typical things of treatment plans and case conceptualizations and how to diagnose, all of those things. We have to write notes. Super important to know how to write your notes well and to get them submitted on time, which is a real downfall for a lot of therapists. And if you work with insurance, that is major, so that you or the company you work for can get paid for that time that you've spent. We could probably spend a whole lot of time on that. So you've got all of those types of things. Working with individuals, working with groups, sometimes families. I have attended IEPs in the school system when I worked in community mental health. But there were a couple of other things that I really thought about that are really helpful to know when you're in the field, that we often, we think about, but I don't think that we think of them as often, for responsibilities as often as we think of, like, those daily tasks that we do often. So one of the things is to provide that safe space. And if you cannot provide a safe space for your patient is not going to feel safe, and they need to feel safe when they come to therapy. And one of the ways that we do that is by our own emotional regulation. And I'm sorry to say that even in a master's program, a lot of times we don't talk about our personal responsibility of having our own emotional regulation, because you've learned in biology, maybe Psych 101, about those mirror neurons and contagion emotions. And if we are wound up and bound up and all of those types of things, coming a little unhinged on the inside, our patient is going to feel that. And again, they're not going to be safe. So working on ourselves, therapist heal thyself, or have another therapist help us heal ourselves, that kind of thing. And then certainly codes of ethics, know what they are. And I will be honest, we have that code of ethics, and sometimes they look a little bit different in a rural community as opposed to living in a metropolitan city. So we're not saying we're going to break or bend, but how do they look and how do they play out a little bit differently? So getting some good supervision or consultation on that. So those are just a few of the things that I kind of thought about as far as responsibilities go.
Yeah, I love how you said, that self-regulation of our own emotions. I think not only as counselors we can do that, but you know, as people in general,
Yes.
no matter what your job title is, if we're going into a situation wound up, you know, the chances are it's not going to be a pretty scene, and people aren't going to want to be around us and things of that nature. So I totally get that. I love that you included that. I never
Yes.
even thought about that.
Yeah.
So
Super important.
very well. Katrina, Nikki, do y'all want to add anything to that?
Nope. That was well said. Well said.
Yeah, well said. I think that these are extremely important. If you some of the most vulnerable topics come up in these sessions, and being able to create a safe space is that's one that I can't over express how important that is, because a lot of people are hesitant to even try counseling, and so if they ever do give that a chance, if they ever do try that, it is really important that their first try they feel safe, at least.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, next question. How do you, Dr. Birkey, individualize treatment for your patients? In what ways do you do that?
It depends on what they need. What are they looking for? I don't deal with a lot of deep pathology. So my caseload tends to be a little lighter emotionally. And we talk about really heavy things and hard things, but typically not like with some of the more heavy hitting diagnosis that we may be trying to find in our DSM. And so a couple of the things that I've actually been trained in are the EMDR method and also flash technique. And those are some of the ways that I can set myself apart from many therapists. There are a lot of therapists who know that, but by and large, I'm finding most do not. And so I can use those types of things to bring down what we call subjective units of distress, or SUDs, for short, and to help patients begin to feel much calmer. One of the things that I do in session that a lot of people don't really talk about, and again, that we don't talk about a lot in the master's program, is we laugh in session. And I tell my patients first session when I meet them, I said, you know, sometimes we will laugh because a situation is so absurd. There's almost like nothing else you can do but sit there and laugh about it for a minute. And they get that. And it's a really good way of being able to connect with people. You know, when you laugh with people, it connects you heart and soul in many ways. So that's just some of the things I do. You know, I don't know that I do anything that spectacular outside of what most people do, but I really try to get to know my clients, who they are, their what they want, what do they want out of therapy, and I do my best to make sure they get that.
Yeah, I think laughter is, I mean, it's an old saying, but the best medicine.
Yes.
I think if we can bring humor into it, I connect with humor. So
Yes.
I know in our human nature, I think that's what we would want to do, is to have fun, you know, laugh with each other, and even sometimes, like you said, laugh at a ridiculous scenario that we're in. I know I've had to laugh some things off in my own counseling and my family journey. So that's a great answer. I love that.
Thank you.
Okay. Katrina, Nikki, anything?
I think I was just going to add to say that I think that we take life so serious at times that sometimes we do need someone, you know, whether it's a counselor, to tell us it's okay to laugh, because life is so beyond. You're so serious most of the time: job, family, bills, all the tough adult stuff that sometimes we as adults forget to have that laughter and have that joy as children do, that we see so many times. That is contagious. So I definitely love that I love that Dr. Birkey starts with that also, because I believe it's good for your soul too. It's good medicine.
Absolutely.
I wanted to point out that I vouch for EMDR. I've had it in my therapy and it really helped. But I've not heard of flash therapy.
Flash technique, yes.
Flash technique.
Its roots are in EMDR, but when it works even quicker than EMDR, and I have had amazing success with it myself. So maybe something to look into.
I will. Thank you. That sounds
Yeah.
exciting.
And
Yes.
for those of us that don't know what EMDR is, can you just give us like a brief synopsis?
Yes, it's eye movement, reprocessing, and desensitization. It's a lot of big words, so we call it EMDR. The idea is that we bilaterally stimulate both sides of the brain to work out trauma. And you do need to be trained in it. And the training is generally, if you go to be trained in it, it's generally 2 weekends of 3 days each. And when I say 3 days, I mean 8 to 5, you get a break for lunch, and it is packed other than that. So it's a deep, intensive training. But when you're able to do that, your patient doesn't forget their trauma. You know, we're not wiping anyone's memories clean. We're not doing anything, erasing who they are, erasing their memories, but they're able to look at a situation for what it was. And that doesn't mean that people won't still grieve. It doesn't mean that they won't still feel sad or hurt. But what it does mean is that that situation, when it works well, it takes the claws, takes the meat hooks out of the heart. And so that every time you think about that situation, you don't want to just crumble or run away, or, you know, the things that trauma typically does to people. So in a super short nutshell, that's what it is. You can use tappers. We call them tappers. They're like little game buzzers. You can tap on knees. You can use a light bar. You may have seen that on TV. You can use your fingers to go back and forth. During the demonstration, I even saw in my training, I even saw someone use sugar packets on each side. So they were saying no matter where you are, if you have a need for this, you're able to administer it if you're trained in it.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's an amazing technique.
I may have to try it out.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. What is your process for planning a counseling session with a client?
I'm not a huge planner of that. When I first started, I was much more of a planner. And part of the reason for that is because I worked with children. And all of you know from being around children, if you let them have a chance, things can go off the rails really quickly. So I planned much more deeply or much more carefully when I worked with children to have a particular activity or game we were going to play to meet a particular need of the treatment plan. Remember, you're always working toward that treatment plan. But now in fact, right now I work exclusively with adults, and that kind of develops a little bit more organically for me. I'm not saying it does for everyone, but I know the general theme. I know what we're working on, and very often we're working on things that have come up in the past week that I don't know about. So we're working on reframing that. We're, you know, those types of things. Looking at who we think we are in relation to what has happened. That's a really big one. So as far as a formal planning process, you know, I want to have my treatment plan and I want things to go toward that, but I generally don't write down, you know, piece by piece. Now, when you work for certain organizations, you're going to have to do that because that is their policy, their procedure. And for insurance, in that, you know, in your SOAP note, your plan, you probably need to be a little bit more detailed. In my plan, I'm like, you know, continue to work on so-and-so, client's going to do X, whatever they're going to do. And then the next week I can ask, you know, how'd that go? Did you get that done? What happened? That kind of thing. So does that answer your question well enough?
Yes.
Okay.
More organically. I like that when it's happening in the moment.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Oh, I skipped a question. Let me go back. And these are in no particular order, so it's okay.
Sure.
What do you do if you decide you cannot provide the counseling that a client needs?
That has not happened for a long time. When it did happen, when there were things outside of my scope of training, I referred to another therapist. Sometimes you will find that people really attach to you and they no longer need the therapy that they may think they need. And you kind of need to be stretching those appointments out a little further, or, saying, oh, why don't we take a break for a couple of weeks and make an appointment 2 weeks from today and let's see how that goes. And in the meantime, I'm here if you need me. So I've done those kinds of things. Oh, and I've certainly been fired by clients. And if you haven't been fired by a client yet, let me promise you, you will. You can be the best therapist on the planet, and someone is going to say you have no idea what you're doing. So when that happens, don't take it personal. Not everyone is for everyone. So that's just part of the process in the therapy world that we live in. And then there are other things as far as referrals. Sometimes I will refer out for medication evaluation, suggest, and I put that in my notes, that therapist thinks patient should, or has suggested to patient that they be evaluated by a psychiatrist, or talk to their general practitioner about certain things. And then there was one other one that I remembered I was going to tell you. When you refer out to another therapist, you really should be providing about 3 referrals, if possible. So just that. And sometimes the truth is, unfortunately, sometimes you and a patient just don't mesh. You don't establish that therapeutic bond. And so when especially when you work for an organization, it doesn't have to be hard to say, we've been doing this for 4 weeks in a row, 6 weeks, however long. Tell me how you think that's going. What are you feeling? And give them the opportunity to do that. And then you can begin having that conversation. And a lot of times you may find that they've been thinking, yeah, this just isn't what I was hoping it would be, but I don't know any better. I don't know what to say. I'm afraid of hurting their feelings or whatever. So if you're comfortable enough to open up that door and say, there may be someone who can meet your needs better than I can. And if you want to stay with me, hey, I'm all for it. We'll keep on. And yet, there may be someone here who's a little bit more skilled in a certain area to help you. So.
Okay, this one wasn't on the list, but you kind of touched on it a little bit. If there's a client you have that I guess doesn't want to terminate the relationship because they're enjoying the therapy so much, but you feel as though they don't need you anymore, how does that conversation go?
Yeah, well, they're paying you to be their friend at that point.
Right.
And the problem is, it's what they perceive as a friend, because we know in our codes of ethics that that's just not possible, at least at that time. So, you're just, it can be a hard conversation to have. And just to say, this has developed, or I feel like maybe this is developing more into something that you can handle with your friends. Maybe let's talk about you developing more of a social life. That might be something else that you add to your treatment plan. Because remember, treatment plans can change and adjust and those kinds of things. So maybe now you've found a new thing that they would like to work on, that kind of thing. But at some point you may just have to gently say, and I would be very careful. I would certainly run it by a supervisor before I did that. I would document it very well, those kinds of things, and maybe even have a couple of conversations about it. I'm not sure I would just have bring them in one day and say, we're done. Nothing like
Time to
that,
spread
but
your
maybe.
wings.
I said, yes, poor little birdie. Nothing like that. We can begin spacing it apart. And again, reassure them, hey, if you need me, just call my office. I'll do my best to get you in and, see how that goes.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Okay, sorry I added that one in there, but
No, that's fine. That's fine.
so.
That's good.
Okay, last question on this before we get to some more personal questions. If a client needs after-hours support, how do you typically respond to them?
I don't. Now, let me back that up. There are a couple of reasons for this. The first one is, and anyone watching, don't tune out yet. Hear everything I have to say. I establish tight boundaries around my personal life.
Mhm.
My job is my job. My job is not my life, whether that's in therapy or whether that's as a professor. And most people, there are some people who do not care for that, and yet most people really grow to respect it. And other people are like, wow, I wish I could figure out how to do that or learn to do that. So I'm all for boundaries, taking coffee breaks, taking a lunch break, those kinds of things, leaving at 5 o'clock. Now, there always are circumstances. My husband is a therapist, and sometimes he'll have a crisis come in right at the end of the day, and that's just part of it. We really are part of the medical profession, and that's part of the medical profession. Now, let me also say that as a private practitioner, again, I go back to most of the diagnosis that I deal with are not things where people have a need to contact me, at 8 o'clock at night, that kind of thing. And I tell them in my informed consent, if you need care after hours, go to the emergency room, that kind of thing. So that's not to say I have never responded off hours. I have. So I don't want to give that impression that I'm totally tight with my boundaries, because none of us are. But anyways, yeah, I'm pretty good about that. And again, I'm not working with a highly volatile population either, and I'm not on call. Those types of things. So I hope that answers your question.
No, absolutely.
Well enough, and that people don't think I'm a meanie. I'm not a meanie.
No, you have boundaries, and a lot of people need to learn how to, work within boundaries. So
Yeah.
set their own boundaries. Goodness gracious.
Our families don't need us coming home at night when we're supposed to be with them and all caring for each other and building a life together. And yet my mind is set on the people that I just left. They do come up during the evening, on the weekend, because we're human. We think about it. Maybe we kind of mull something over a little bit, but as far as spending a lot of time, I don't. I just don't, because I need that break for them and for me and my family.
Absolutely.
That is healthy, and I applaud that. I hope you inspire others to set their own boundaries for
You
their
can do
health.
it. You can do it, Nikki. You can do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, boundaries, I think, are some of the most important things we can have in our lives, because I've dealt with people who, they don't know boundaries, and it strains the relationship no matter what.
It does. And when we begin violating our own boundaries, and allowing people to enter into that personal part of our life, they no longer respect us as professionals. I'll just be real honest with you. You even think about the people you work with, and yes, occasionally you get that phone call. We all do, no matter what profession we're in. We get a phone call from someone sometime at night when we're not expecting it. But if that is a common theme and a common thing that you allow, your patients won't respect you as a professional. They'll think you're there to do their bidding. That sounds harsh, and I don't mean it to be.
No, it's true. It makes sense. So, okay, let's get into a couple of personal questions here.
Okay.
What led you to the counseling profession in the first place?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question, and I remember being in the 4th grade and going to the public library and finding a book about a counselor. I'd never known one. I'd never been to one, but all of a sudden I decided I wanted to be a counselor, and I wanted to be a teacher. Well, many years passed. I did go to college off and on, and reared my children. My children were, our youngest was late in high school, and our daughter was starting college, our oldest. And in 2006, my brother died. And when he died, I realized, time is fleeting. I mean, I knew that, but when those types of things happen, it just reawakens you to, if I'm ever going to do this, this is the time, because none of us are promised decades, to do the things that we always wanted to do. It's part of a, what is that song? I can't think of it. Anyways, way before your time. Anyway, so thinking about that, went back and got my degree in communication studies. And during that time, I discovered coaching, life coaching, and I got trained in that and found out I was good at it. But in building that scaffolding with clients, I also realized that for many of their things, I would be operating outside of the scope of my training, and that I needed more training. And so because of that, I went immediately from comm studies into a counseling master's program, and then took a few years off and went back for my doctorate. So that's the simple story of how all that fell out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Katrina was in communication as well, and now she's
Yes, she was.
2 degrees down the road. I was like, whoa, deja vu.
Katrina and I have known each other for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say Dr. Birkey was my tough cookie because she gave me my first B. I had like all my A's going, and Dr. Birkey just came in. But I would say
Yeah.
she's one of the best professor I had. She pushes you and you learn what you need to learn. So I can't wait till when I have to take my counseling classes with her, because I know that she will bring, let me put it this way. I know she brings out the best out of you.
Oh, thank you.
So she
Well,
look forward for when I have to take counseling classes with her, because she did bring out the best in that class.
we
Absolutely.
had some good conversations then,
Sure
didn't we? Yes, I will always treasure those.
Me too, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Okay, next question. What qualities do you possess that help you as a counselor?
I was thinking about this, and again, I don't know that I do anything that spectacular outside, excuse me, outside of a lot of counselors. There are some things that I'm pretty passionate about, though, and that is doing things within the code of ethics. I have a very strong core value about that. And I am always learning, always thinking, what is the next training I can take? We have to be careful because we can become training junkies, but if there's a place you can use it in your counseling, and in fact, when you get to the place that you have to get CEUs, don't just go to all the free trainings and take the free ones you can find online. Those are great for certain things. But fork out a little bit of cash to get trained in something you really enjoy doing, something you're really fascinated in. So bringing a sense of peace and calm, and because I can get quite excited quite easily. A lot of people may not necessarily see me that way, but my sessions are very, very regulated when they need to be. So, I've learned to be able to do that and to be calm and quiet with people, to match their energy. If they want to be fun and super engaged, we can do that. If they need to be quiet and thoughtful and process, we can do that. We can do what the client needs. So that, I think just having a spirit of being creative, just thinking about things, and again, laughter. So those are just a few of the things I think that makes me pretty good at the therapy piece of it.
Sorry, I lost my screen for a second. Lifelong learner. I love that you said that, because I think teachers in general are that way, or most of them, most of the
Yes.
ones that I know, and so I connect with that on a deep level. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to ask the next question, but you've kind of touched on this next one. How do you separate your work and your home life? In what ways do you do that? Besides not taking home, I guess, the last session, or the sessions from the day, excuse me.
Yeah. Let me go back to that. Sometimes you will have that one client, it just kind of sticks with you. So you may have to really work at that. And there's an exercise called the container exercise. You can look it up. Maybe you need to put that client in your container and send them away for a little bit for the weekend. As far as being a professor, some of the things I do is that I quit work at 4 or between 4 and 5 o'clock every afternoon. I'm done. I rarely check my email after between 4 and 5. I stop somewhere, and you generally don't check it again until the next morning, unless I know that there are a lot of things up in the air. Like the beginning of the semester, I'm a little bit more lenient about. Right now I'm on the search committee. So yeah, I'm in my email a lot, dealing with our search team, going back and forth about some things like that. So I do that. I stay out of my email on the weekends. I don't grade on the weekends. And, a lot of people think, well, I have to. It all gets done. It all gets done eventually, and somehow. But again, I think we need to be very, very careful about exchanging who we are for our profession. My profession is here to not only for me to serve in it, but for it to serve me. I'm not going to go into a profession that doesn't do anything for me either. And again, that, depending on how people took that could sound selfish, but we all want things out of in exchange for how we spend our time and our energy. And, those are just some of the things that I've drawn up to be able to separate school and therapy work from my home and family life.
And Taylor, if I could add something to Dr. Birkey, I think even as younger people, I think when you get older, you're able to establish that even more, right? You're able to create those boundaries, because as younger, when I said younger, I mean us learning what you have already learned. It's so much harder for us because we don't want to hurt feelings. We want to be the best out of the best, or we want to make sure the pressure that we put on ourselves to be better. And I remember being a coach, and I love that even this word of wisdom you're giving us and our viewers as well, that when I was a coach, I was so easily burnt out because I didn't know how to turn it off. Mm-hmm. And I made it a point. It said, okay, when I get into the car and I drove up to my apartment at that time, I'm turning it off. I'm not taking it upstairs with me. However, I would say that, but as you said, you still have emails, kids responding to you or texting you late. So there was always an obligation for work that you could never turn off. And when I say could never, you had other responsibilities in terms of you're responsible for these kids, you're responsible for what they're doing, or you're responsible to making sure that they're okay as well. So for you to get to that point, would you say it took you experience to be able to draw that line? Because I feel like it is a line drawn. Or is it something that you have developed over the years because you recognize how healthy it is for you and for your family and for your marriage and so on?
I would have to say both of those things.
Okay.
And as counselors, we can also fall easily into that people pleasing role.
Mhm.
And then we wake up one day and find out we think we're pleasing everyone else. And the truth is we're really not, because you can't please all the people all the time. You're lucky to please some of the people some of the time. And looking at who are the people do I want to please? And that is my husband and my family, and a handful of close friends. And so those are the people that in the end of this life truly count, that I have given that extra energy to. But when you wake up and you realize I am burnt out, I am exhausted. And here's the thing, if you're not quick to respond to people, they figure it out, Katrina.
Yes,
They
ma'am.
figure it out. So, it's really interesting when you allow people to have some of that autonomy and independence. They come to their own conclusions a lot of times. Just find a way to get things done. So yeah, and I haven't always been that way. Again, it's something that's developed for me.
Do you mean that we have to sit and listen to our own thoughts?
Yeah, believe it or not, yes.
It's
Yes.
helpful. It's really helpful.
Yes.
Sure.
Process. Yes.
Absolutely. You kind of touched on this a second ago, but what things do you do for your own mental health within your practice as a counselor, but also as a professor? And then how do you prevent burnout?
Again, with trying to establish those boundaries, and again, the best I can. It's always a work in progress. One of the things I've been working on is getting rid of some things that the less I have to deal with, and as far as clutter goes, the better off I am. In fact, I was telling our GA today, I said, I'm thinking about just moving some of the books out of my office at work, because fewer books appear to be a neater environment. And my desk had been very messy for, oh gosh, longer than it should have been. I can't even tell you how long. And the other night I thought, I'm just going to take a minute and straighten it up. And when I walked in the next day, it was like, oh my goodness, this is so refreshing just to look at my desk with, no more on it than needed to be. So yeah, I'm trying to take care of a few things like that. I listen to podcasts going back and forth to work. I have a 30-minute drive. It's not that far, but it's 30 minutes from my house to the school. Or I don't listen to anything at all. Sometimes I turn it off. Sometimes, most of the time when I'm at home, I do not have the TV going. Very, very rarely do I. So I surround myself with a lot of quiet. And a lot of people think, oh, if I had to live in quiet, I'd go out of my mind. And that concerns me for our culture. It concerns me for therapists. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to live in, total silence. I don't mean that, but learn to appreciate some peace and quiet, and to learn to be at home with your own thoughts so that you have time to think. Because if you've got constant noise going, you don't have time to think about your thinking, that metacognition. And that could be a very dangerous place for anyone. And I think especially a therapist.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, last question. What has been your greatest accomplishment as a counselor or professor?
I was thinking about that, and I don't know that I have one. I just, I don't know that I can say, I think other people may be more qualified to answer that for me in some ways than I am. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I think I do some things really well. But as far as greatest, I don't know. I thought about that, and I wish I had a much better answer. But what I did write down is that, what was it? Hold on just a second. Okay, no one thing, but I do, and please hear me when I say this, that I'm in no way bragging that I'm the best therapist, because I'm not. There are people who are better than I am. There are people who are much more skilled than I am. but I do have excellent outcomes in my therapy sessions. And part of the reason for that is because I train myself on the topics that my patients are seeking help with. I learn several techniques and use those as appropriate. I'm able to recommend lots of helps because I read and listen to lots of things. And again, I stay emotionally regulated in session. So I don't know that those are the best things. Here lately, I think some of my students would say the best thing is to help them get registered for class. And you know what? When people are frustrated over something that ought to be so simple in this big world of technology, that's huge. That is huge. And some of the emails I've gotten, you would have thought I had saved their week, honestly. So, and it could be anyone who's helping them, not just me. So I think meeting people where they are and in the moment, maybe that's one of the greatest things. I don't.
Yeah, the little
Yeah,
things.
that's not a
they
very
add
good
up.
answer to.
No, it's good. It's
That's a
good.
great answer. Absolutely. I you have saved me a couple of times. You're extremely responsive to me when it comes to what I need to do in the moment, of with all these trying to get the logistics of trying to get things together with the grad program or whatever. Like I said at the beginning, you've just been indispensable for me. So that's no understatement that you said that you make our
Thank
week.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That really encourages me when people do notice. And one of the things that I think about an online program, and I've been thinking about this a lot, is that most of our master students are working professionals by and large. They have spouses or partners, that many of them have children, that type of thing. So when they have 5 minutes to write an email, if I have 5 minutes that I can possibly respond, I need to go ahead and get that done so that when they have a longer segment of time to work, they can get right to work and not be waiting on me to respond to them. And, I've read a lot about leadership and business, and they say, oh, only answer your email twice a day, 10 o'clock in the morning and right before you go home. And you know what? I just don't know that that's fair to the students that I work with, my population here. So that's one of the things that I do work hard at, is responding so that when students are ready, they can move and they're
Right.
not waiting on me.
And
I
we
can
appreciate that, and it makes
add one last
perfect
thing,
sense.
Taylor. I'll add one thing. I think the
Go for it.
quality of teaching you give to your students is the best. And the quality of teaching that prepares us and that will prepare students for the real world of work.
Thank you,
So
Katrina.
I think that toughness, that honesty, brings out the best in students, because if they don't get it from you, or they don't get it from our professors, when we do go into the world of work in our profession, do we expect our clients to tell us when they are not qualified, or they do not know the ins and outs of that? So
Right.
I was, as an accomplishment, just having you in communications and looking forward for counseling in the counseling classes, is that the quality of teaching you give, whether it is in person or online, that matters, because you will bring out the best, and you bring out the best in your students. And I bet there are many students that are able to say that just as I can.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. And sometimes we even get B's, right, Katrina?
Yep. And it's okay.
Just kidding. Okay. Well, that concludes our time for this evening. If you would like more information on the ENMU counseling program or to apply, please visit www.enmu.edu. Thanks for listening to Counselor U. sponsored by the wonderful New Mexico Expanding Opportunities Project. And we hope that you have a wonderful week. Thank you, Dr. Birkey, for joining us this
you.
evening.
It was
Thank you,
my
Dr.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.